Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so why don't we get started? First, thank you all for joining us. My name is Matt Binder. I am the Adult Program Coordinator here at the Schaumburg Township District Library. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, we have two doctoral interns from the Hoffman Estates Department of Health and Human Services, Justin and Uranaya. They're going to be talking about seasonal affect disorder and holiday depression. Before we get into that, I just wanted to remind you to keep checking our website, schaumburglibrary.org, our events page for our upcoming programs. Also about our upcoming print newsletter, which is returning during COVID. As you know, our print newsletter stopped due to the uncertainty, but now we have a little more stability. We're going to be releasing a print newsletter for December through February. So when that comes to your house, please hang on to it. But you can always find all of our programs and events coming up on the library website. Okay, that is enough from me. So I'm going to turn it over to Uranaya and Justin.
Thank you, Matt. Well, we're excited to be with you all this evening. Like Matt said, we are both doctoral interns here at the Health and Human Services Department at HHS. And today we are just going to be talking to you about seasonal affective disorder. It's a time of year where it's getting a bit colder, the sun is going down a bit earlier, it's getting darker. And while there's a lot of holiday cheer and a lot of holiday celebrations that are happening, there's something about this time of year that also brings out the less positive emotions in all of us. And so we will be speaking about those feelings today.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Justin. So today we'll be talking about a few topics beyond just SAD. SAD is the main focus, but we'll also be doing some depression as well and some other things about how you cope with the holidays. So our general format for the presentation today will be 1, seasonal affective disorder, and what is that? 2, general statistics about seasonal affective disorder, which I'll be referring to as SAD or SAD. And 3, symptom and treatment, and then 4, coping with stress during the holidays. So like I mentioned before, some general concepts we'll be covering will be seasonal affective disorder, SAD, depression, risk factors, but also, very importantly, identification and prevention.
Before we talk about seasonal affective disorder, it's important for us to first talk about depression and define what depression actually is. It's a common mental health condition that affects our moods. We've all experienced feelings of depression or being depressed. And what makes it more clinical or reoccurring is those who are impacted for over 2 weeks. And so some of the symptoms that can be felt when someone is depressed are feelings of sadness, having depressed mood, loss of interest in activities that one once enjoyed, a loss of an appetite or increase in appetite that's unrelated to dieting or lifestyle change. Especially in these winter times, we can see oversleeping, but trouble sleeping is also a symptom that is seen in depression. We have changes in energy, mostly decreased energy, feelings of restlessness, fatigue, lethargy. We also have restlessness or feeling unmotivated. Another thing that a lot of people do not think about is also like how body movement, speech can also slow down when you're feeling depressed. This happens because your body may be taking longer time to process because you're having difficulty concentrating or focusing. And I think one of the hallmark symptoms of depression that most of us know about is thoughts of death or suicide. I stated before that in order for depression to be clinical or to be less than that feeling of, those feelings that we kind of feel in our everyday lives, the symptoms must be present for at least 2 weeks. And the symptoms must also impact your functioning. And so while we may have moments where we're depressed, depression at the clinical level impacts your ability to go through your daily tasks, to navigate your daily life. You might be having problems that you weren't having before, and it makes it harder for you to just go about your day-to-day tasks. So it's also important for you to think about any medical conditions that you may be having, because medical conditions can also bring about feelings of depression, especially when there's chronic pain or any physical discomfort.
So SAD, what is that exactly? I think we've all heard about that before, noticing a change in the season, noticing that, wow, it gets pretty dark pretty quickly. Now I'm feeling pretty down. So SAD is a mood disorder overall. It recurs from year to year. And SAD coincides with the change in the seasons. So what you typically probably know about is winter SAD or winter depression. This begins in the fall or early winter and goes away during the spring and summer months. What you might not know as much about is summer pattern SAD or summer depression. This starts in the spring and summer months and ends in the fall and winter. This is much less common, but still definitely something that can happen. With SAD, you might notice some changes in mood, in your behavior, and your ability to navigate daily tasks. And also, it's very important to talk with your doctor if you notice that you're identifying some symptoms of SAD, of depression, things like that. So how does SAD happen? So there are three possible ways that SAD can occur. There are others, but these are the three main ones. So three are circadian rhythm, melatonin, and serotonin. So circadian rhythm is also known as your biological clock or your internal clock. This can get affected by less sunlight. When your internal clock is disrupted, you may find that your sleep is kind of out of sync. You may find yourself sleeping and waking at normal times, being more tired, and that fatigue can also lead to depression as well. So overall, the routine is very important to keep. Melatonin is a part of circadian rhythm made by your brain. And you probably also heard of that. You can find melatonin supplements at your local drugstore, but that affects your mood as well and also sleep patterns. And that can be affected by, changes in seasons, access to light, things like that. With serotonin, you've probably heard of that as the happiness neurotransmitter. And that's also affected by less sunlight too. When you have less serotonin in your nervous system, you may find that you might not be as happy, maybe even to the point of being more depressed. And so with a change in season, less sunlight and less serotonin production, risk of SAD developing can increase.
All right, so here are just some statistics associated with seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. Seasonal affective disorder is more prevalent in places that are above the equator, and especially in the United States, it's going to be more prevalent and present in the northern states. I also read somewhere that states that are surrounded by the Great Lakes may also have a higher prevalence of SAD. SAD affects about 500,000 Americans yearly, which is about 5%. About 10 to 20% of Americans who experience SAD may have mild episodes, although 6% of people who experience seasonal affective disorder can end up having to visit the hospital as a result. It seems that January and February seem to be a time where seasonal affective disorder is a bit more common and prevalent. Some reasoning behind that is that January and February are right after the holidays. And for some people, there is some disappointment or some upset that can happen after the holidays, especially we're still in experiencing the effects of COVID and we're in a pandemic, and the holidays may be another time and serve as another reminder that you're not able to gather with your family the way that you used to. Seasonal affective disorder seems to have some effect in gender, as it affects 3 out of 4 women, and men tend to suffer more severe symptoms. While the general onset for age of SAD is around 20 years old, it can be diagnosed anywhere from 18 to 30. It's said that after middle age that SAD is less prevalent, and that at that point it can become more depression or depression-like. Some people who have experiences of SAD will also commonly have people in their families who have other mental health conditions. So for those who have family history of mental health. About half of those who suffer from SAD have family history of mental health. About 34% of those who experience SAD have family members who abuse alcohol. Now, the risk of SAD in older populations is a bit unique because of certain factors. So mobility has a couple of different meanings, right? There is less ability to move around as freely as populations may want to, either because of needing transportation, because of devices needed for mobility, and that can keep someone from being out in the community or even how much time that you are outside and out of your house. Another thing that can be exacerbated is the tolerance to cold. A lot of underlying conditions create an opportunity for people who are older to be less tolerant to cold. For people who have arthritis, it can cause your joints to be more achy. And for other conditions, cold just may make the symptoms you have worse. Older populations are more at risk for depression in general because of a couple of things. One is the development of chronic conditions later in life, and also this unique experience of loss. So loss across a couple domains. Older populations have experienced death of loved ones. They've lost the ability to work or have retired. Mobility and driving kind of go hand in hand, but also just loss of driving, the freedom of being able to go to and from at your leisure. And also there is some loss of ability to engage in activities that you once were able to, either because of loss of work. There are some people who derive joy from their occupation, and also limited mobility can affect how many activities you're able to engage in. It's important to not ignore some of the symptoms, especially when you feel yourself feeling off or when you notice a loved one feeling off. When left untreated and undiagnosed, the complications of SAD can be further exacerbated by social withdrawal. They can cause problems at school, work, or any space where you're around where working relationships are important. This can complicate issues of substance abuse. This can also lead to other mental health disorders, such as anxiety or eating disorders. And this can also further cause suicidal thoughts or behavior. Now I'm going to give some common symptoms of SAD, and also we'll talk about treatment in this session. So a lot of times you may hear the phrase that I've got the blues, or like you might have heard the general feeling of sadness that may happen in the winter as the winter blues. While SAD and winter blues have similar symptoms, seasonal affective disorder is much more severe because it can have an effect on someone's mental health and also can cause significant mental decline. This is implicated in feelings of hopelessness, having feelings of anxiety, and seasonal affective disorder will also have more of a negative impact on your relationships and work. So I'm not going to read all of them, but I will just give some examples of how some of these symptoms may be more prevalent in the fall onset seasonal affective disorder or the summer onset seasonal affective disorder. Especially for the fall onset, you might experience more physical symptoms just because of the cold weather, there's less light. And like we said before, some of the more medical conditions can have your body feeling less comfortable. And also just you're in the home. And so you may have symptoms of oversleeping. You can have tenseness in your bones, feeling like joints are not as mobile. You can also feel irritated. You can also have experiences of weight gain because you may be in the house more, you may be around more food. And also giving credence to the fact that we are still in a pandemic, there is still that loss of gathering with family in a way that may have been reflective of larger family gatherings or even just being isolated from your loved ones. For the spring onset of seasonal affective, you may see more symptoms of weight loss and poor appetite. You may also have irritability as opposed to feelings of sadness, as in the spring to summertime, the weather is warming up. And a lot of times we associate hot weather with how irritable or how quick to anger people can get. Some of the symptoms that are unique to older populations, especially when it comes to seasonal affective disorder, is this idea of the post-holiday blues. So we talked a little bit before about the idea of January and February being months where SAD may be more prevalent. And that's kind of what the post-holiday blues are. It's a time where people, after the holidays, either are experiencing some letdown or disappointment as a result of what's gone on with the holidays. It can be from not being able to gather with family. It can be that family, oftentimes around holidays, families can have disagreements. And that can also bring about other painful memories or memories of discomfort. Something to also keep in mind is that in older populations, preparation for suicide may look like reckless behavior. And reckless behavior can be categorized as something like not wearing a seatbelt, or not taking the proper dosage of the medication, or by not taking the precautions that you need in order to safely navigate. It can also look like the spontaneous donation of prized possessions. In older populations as well, oversleeping may be more common because and this is interesting because a lot of people state that as the older they get, the less sleep that they might need or the less sleep that they may partake in. So when you notice oversleeping, it might be an indication that something may be a bit off or may not be feeling right. The good news for all of this is that there is treatment, and not all of it is dependent on medication. So light therapy, and I'll just go through generally some of the options that are on the screen, but light therapy is a technique where doctors recommend that either a person can go outside and be outside between the hours of 6 a.m. or 8 a.m. And that is when you'll get the optimum sunlight. And that's when the sun rays are the most powerful during those days where we have shorter days and longer nights. If you're unable to get out between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m., you can also have a apparatus that's a light that shines white light, and you can sit in front of that light for about 30 minutes. This imitates sunlight, and as Justin talked about, circadian rhythms and different hormones that are implicated in our sleep patterns. When you are absorbing a lot more light or exposing yourself to more light, you can help regulate some of those, the production or balance some of those hormones, and possibly help regulate your sleep. Medication is also an option because seasonal affective disorder is a type of depression. And there are a lot of people who utilize medication in order to treat their depression. And so seasonal affective disorder is no different. Some other non-medicative options are spending more time in a study, especially during that 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. hour, staying active, 30-minute walks. Exercise is another way to get some of that serotonin and some more feel-good hormones pumping in your system. And also walking is another way for you to spend time outside of the house, spend out time in the community, and possibly see people that you haven't seen in a while. Walking and spending more time outside can help with stress management and also help with relaxation. If there are activities that bring joy, like knitting or FaceTiming grandchildren or watching certain reruns or certain shows that bring about good feelings, those are all great things to implement at this time. A lot of people find joy in cooking. Some people find joy in cleaning. Whatever it is that you feel allows you to relieve stress and allows you to relax are things that to up intake during the time of when you're feeling seasonal affective disorder or that type of sadness. Therapy is also a great option for treatment, as it may be helpful to have emotional support as you are navigating seasonal affective disorder and other feelings of loss and other emotional situations that can be adding to your experience of seasonal affective disorder. My mother always talks about the quality of company that you keep as being important, and I think here it also applies. It's important to be around people who keep you laughing and smiling, and so reaching out to friends, loved ones, family in any way to make sure that you are surrounded by love will also help keep your mood up and also will help build that more emotional support. Another thing that I actually didn't think about that was listed was about putting more decorations into the space. Having plants, there's been a phenomenon of people buying more plants lately, and that's one because plants regulate oxygen and produce oxygen, but also plants provide an opportunity for you to care for something. It's another activity for you to do. And they also they look really nice. And so it's another way to spruce up your home, to add some different elements, putting up holiday decor for whatever celebrations your family holds dear, maybe another thing that can bring about positive feelings and happiness, and especially using bright colors. Brighter colors can help lift your mood, especially in juxtaposition to the darkness that we may be seeing outside. Another thing that's important but isn't as talked about is your diet. And so making sure that you are eating healthy and that you are managing your intake of certain things so that your mood can also be uplifted.
So thank you for that, Renaya. So we've gone over quite a bit of the symptoms for SAD, as well as some of the ways to treat it. So now I'll be going a bit more into that as well. It'll be some repeats, but also some coping strategies and how we can deal with some of the holiday blues and SAD. So one question I will posit, I know I can't see you all, but I guess I'll answer my own question, but can depression be related to the holidays? Maybe give a second to think about it, but yes, absolutely. So holiday stress. So it's not just the seasonal change itself, that it's colder outside, the light changes, but also it's just the nature of the holidays themselves. Holidays are great. I know I mentioned before that it's very important to be able to spend time with loved ones, celebrate the past year, cultural events, things like that. However, when we have the holidays, there's also a lot of planning that goes into that. A lot of figuring out organization, events, talking to people, figuring out, how if you're doing gifts, how do I get gifts? How do I, what do I get for who, that sort of thing. And so with the holidays, we can get a lot of stress and pressure to meet many demands. Also, don't want to forget that, a lot of things are happening right now in the world and in our lives too. Finances can be strained. There might be loss of loved ones. And I think definitely there are feelings of isolation, big world events, pandemic. We might feel very cut off from people. And so additional feelings of loss, isolation, and worry can definitely be possible right now and difficult to manage. So some tips on self-care and stress management, and I'll let you all know that this is not an exhaustive list. These are some things that we found to be effective. I use some of these as well. One big thing here is organization. I think that when the holidays come about, we have a lot on our plate. And so one big thing that happens is racing thoughts, a lot of worries. I have to do this, wait, what about that? And that can really kind of clog up our brain, so to speak. All the responsibilities can pile up. We don't know where to start. Things get hectic. We get stressed. SAD can happen, among other things. So one thing that can help is writing things down in a notepad or a calendar, journal, agenda, whatever helps you organize. And maybe to the benefit of technology, you can do that through your computer, on your calendar, maybe just writing down physically is better for you, whatever works. A big thing also is limits and boundaries. And I think with the holidays, a lot of it's always centered around, caring for others, giving. And that's very important. I'm not going to lie, I agree with that too. But I think saying no is also a big important thing that we may forget about when we're so focused on giving. We need to take care of ourselves too. We are not able to do everything forever. We need a break. We need to care for ourselves. And so I think if you find that you're over volunteering for activities, trying to do too much, saying yes to too many things and feeling burnt out, it might be time to maybe take a second for yourself and say, maybe no, maybe let's hold off for a bit. I'd love to do that, but right now I can't. I'm sorry. Maybe not even sorry. Maybe don't be sorry for taking care of yourself, so to speak. Families, boundaries, and recognizing patterns. So boundaries again, but this time with family or friends too. Holidays can often be about, being with family, being with friends, getting together, having a good time. But we know that not all relationships are healthy and happy. Sometimes there can be fighting, conflict, and these can be reoccurring themes. So I think a big thing here is if you know that there have been times in the past with a family member, a certain situation where there was conflict, arguing, it could be very helpful to plan for that accordingly for the future. Maybe say, listen, if we get to this topic of conversation, I'm going to disengage, or let's not talk about this topic during our meeting. I think that's very important to do, just to kind of pre-plan for any potential difficulties that can arise. So a big overall recap of SAD. So these are some behavioral things you can identify with SAD. We talked a lot about the different symptoms, the hopelessness, the sadness, the guilt. But sometimes we may not recognize it. Sometimes we really only notice in hindsight, or when we're kind of in the thick of things through our behaviors. So one big thing can be overeating, especially with winter SAD compared to summer. We may be more inclined to eat and crave food. Unfortunately, the food we crave is not like kale and salads. It's usually more so unhealthy foods, junk foods, and carbohydrates. So if you find yourself eating pretty often, craving, maybe pizza, burrito, ice cream, things like that, it might be a sign that, you're at risk for SAD, or that you may be undergoing that, or even just undergoing a lot of stress regardless. Oversleeping is also a big thing to keep aware of. I think, if you find yourself sleeping 8, 10, 12 hours a day and not even feeling rejuvenated, still feeling pretty fatigued, that's a pretty big warning sign that something might be going on. Similar to the overeating can be the weight gain. Usually with SAD compared to the summer variation, or the winter SAD compared to the summer variation, there's usually more of a chance of getting weight gain. Eating all this junk food, all these carbs, they got to go somewhere. So usually they go to our gut. And so it's very important to keep in mind that these things can happen. And if you notice significant weight gain that you did not plan on, that could be an indicator that maybe SAD, maybe some depression and stress are building up to. Social withdrawal and isolation. So one big thing that can happen is you may feel like, let's say someone gives you a call, like, I'll call them back tomorrow. Or you feel that you want to call a close friend or family member. You're like, but not right now, I don't feel like it. If you find that you're pretty isolated and alone, that maybe no one's reaching out or you're not reaching out, that can be a decent warning sign that something may be going on as well. That can definitely be a hallmark, not just of SAD, but general depression and feeling pretty down as well. So what can we do about SAD? Erin and I talked about quite a few treatment options. Here are a few more and some more details as well. So a big thing about SAD compared to maybe major depression, other forms of depression, is vitamin D. So vitamin D does a lot for us. I can't go into all of it right now, but in general, vitamin D helps with our nervous system, helps with our muscles and our bone health. Vitamin D helps our body, our gut absorb calcium, which is good for our bones. Unfortunately, we get a lot of vitamin D from the sun. The sun helps our body synthesize vitamin D. However, not only are we going out less, but when we do go out in the winter months, we're usually pretty bundled up. So rather than going out with a t-shirt and shorts, I have just my face, which is a highly reduced surface area, unfortunately. So we can try to get some sunlight. I wouldn't totally ignore that, but things we can turn to for extra vitamin D can be food, vitamin D supplements, and light lamps. In terms of specific types of foods, oily fish can be one. I'm not a big fan, but I go with the red meats. But disclaimer, liver, not a big fan. But if you're okay with that, liver can be a good source of vitamin D. Egg yolk as well, and fortified foods. You might find vitamin D fortified cereal. That can be a good way of getting extra vitamin D. Talk therapy. The therapy is a safe and open space to process distressing thoughts, feelings, and experiences. I feel personally, and from my clinical experiences, that in the winter months, it's not like all of a sudden all these sad thoughts just came up out of nowhere. I think for a lot of us, we've been feeling those for quite a while, but the stresses of the holidays, reminders of maybe past regrets, difficult experiences can resurge when the winter holidays come. And so a lot of maybe unprocessed, bottled up things can really start working their way to the surface. And I think talk therapy is a great way to talk about those in a safe space that's, better regulated, controlled with a trained counselor as well. As I mentioned, exercise is very important. With exercise, especially aerobic exercise, so running, jogging, walking, these can all boost serotonin, endorphins, and other feel-good neurochemicals. And kind of obviously, it's also great for your physical health. And I think if your body's feeling good, if you're physically feeling good, that can translate to feeling mentally good as well. So very important too. So a number of other ways to manage SAD. So as mentioned before, light therapy boxes or phototherapy are great options. These are, I don't have a picture, I apologize, but these are very bright devices, and they usually emit multiple wavelengths too. So it's not just the light itself, but some of the light waves that you can't always see, so to speak. These boxes are meant to simulate sunlight. They're usually done very early in the morning, depending on the brightness of your lamp, maybe 20 to 30 minutes. And I will say they're often very safe and effective, but they are not FDA regulated, so I would definitely speak to your doctor about that, just to get some clearance, some suggestions on what devices to use. If they suggest phototherapy is a good fit for you. Dawn simulators. So I might be biased because I have one at home as well. But these are kind of like alarm clocks. However, rather than waking up to a blaring sound going next to your head, it's actually a gradually increasing light source, kind of like the sun. It's at least mine and most I've seen are kind of like a big circle, and they have a gradually increasing yellow light, which is a lot nicer to wake up to and kind of simulates you rising to the sun as opposed to sirens, which is very nice. And obviously the big thing here is light. We have less access to sunlight, but if you do want to go outside, if you have the opportunity, try to go outside when it's brightest outside. And also if you're indoors, try to keep the blinds open and be near those spaces as long as possible. Like I mentioned before, scheduling is very important. Now I know we may try to, if we have a busy week, we don't sleep very well, we'll say, okay, this Saturday I'll sleep in and then we'll catch up. Unfortunately, that's not really how that works. The organization, the routine is very important for us. So I recommend trying to keep that regular sleep and wake cycle to the best of your ability. Difficult, I know, but can be a benefit. And that goes with eating as well. I think without that organization around your eating habits, you may find that it's 11 o'clock at night and you're sitting next to a pint of ice cream. And so having a set eating schedule can also affect, I guess, what you eat, how often you eat, satiation, things like that. In terms of light access, maybe, scheduling, a morning walk every day, if, weather permits, body permits, that could be a good way of getting your daily light access on a regular basis. Socialization, like I mentioned before, isolation definitely can happen. SAD or not, it's been a really rough 1.5, almost 2 years now. And if you find that you're isolated, you're alone, no one to talk to, you don't feel like talking to anybody else, a big thing here, which is, I know it's very difficult because it's kind of opposite of what you want to do, but kind of go out and do something, go out and talk to somebody. As hard as it is to make that phone call, connect with somebody, please try and do it to the best of your ability. That can be playing small get-togethers, walking in the park, meeting for lunch. I know it's harder now, so maybe virtual meetings, phone calls too. Anything really to really feel that connection again. I want to also note that alcohol and drugs can definitely come up and be common when you're experiencing depression. I think alcohol especially can be used when you're feeling distress as a way to cope with that. You can maybe reduce in the moment some of that distress. Unfortunately, alcohol itself is also a depressant. So even if you feel momentarily distracted from some of those distressing worries you may have, those, maybe guilt, sadness, so to speak, in the long term, that can usually get worse with alcohol. It usually ends up being kind of like a negative spiral, so to speak. So it might be helpful for you if you notice that you're often using alcohol or drugs as a coping source to maybe drop those from your routine. Journaling. So as I mentioned prior, journaling can be very helpful. Writing, and not just journaling your daily plans, but also your feelings, your moods, thoughts, and emotions. I think it can get very hectic for us to keep them all kind of right here in our head. So being able to write that down not only tells us what we've been going through and on what day, what time of day, but it helps us plan out to prioritize, reflect on those, and kind of figure out maybe a game plan. Like, I'm noticing I'm having a lot of worries right now. What should I do about that? That sort of thing. And I know we talked a lot about weight gain, cravings for carbs. So it could also maybe help to notice these cravings and carbs and try to maybe switch to healthier options. I know it's challenging. Cravings are difficult. I'm experiencing this right now. It's tough. But yeah, I do believe that even with eating more salads, plants, with the fiber, that can also help with cravings as well. Like I mentioned before, scheduled eating can be very helpful in terms of getting nutrients you need, not feeling like that you have to overeat or undereat or eat when you're not supposed to, quote unquote, like before bed, that sort of thing. And of course, always speak with your doctor. Medications can be effective as well, especially in terms of serotonin. So selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, can be very effective as well for addressing some of the decreases in serotonin you might experience during the winter months. Also, things like thyroid conditions, viruses can also affect your mood and maybe even simulate symptoms of SAD. So very important to speak with your doctor, make sure there are no physiological conditions causing some of your current distress. So we do have a short recap video that we can play for you. It'll cover kind of what we already talked about, but we feel that repetition is always very helpful just to kind of make sure we have everything down. So let's play this and hope it works.
Seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is a topic you may have heard about this time of year. But what is it exactly? Is it a real medical condition, and can you do anything to alleviate the symptoms of the disorder? Hi, I'm Dr. Kia Stagar with Mayo Clinic Health System. First off, seasonal affective disorder is a variation in mood related to the season. It actually is considered a subtype of depression. It's important to point out there are actually two types of seasonal affective disorder: fall-winter onset and spring-summer onset. The one you've most likely heard about is during the winter, with symptoms typically appearing in early fall to early winter and improving usually in the spring. Here are the symptoms of fall-winter seasonal affective disorder. Many are similar to depression and may include a change in mood, reduced energy levels, changes in sleep, typically the need for more sleep. People with a SAD may also withdraw from people and activities that they enjoy. They may also suffer aches and pains. Many notice an increase in appetite for food cravings like carbohydrates, and not surprising, many report weight gain. So how many people are we talking about? Estimates vary, but up to 10% of primary care patients will report symptoms to their doctors. For those with a known history of depression, the number is higher, roughly 15%. Seasonal affective disorder rates are higher in the northern states when compared to the southern states. One theory of what causes seasonal affective disorder has to do with light, or rather the lack of light during winter months. It's believed our body's circadian rhythm, or internal clock, can get out of balance during the winter months when there is less daylight. We also know that serotonin levels play a role in depression. Many people with SAD have a decrease in serotonin. It so happens there's a natural change in serotonin in our brains between winter and summer months. So if you're diagnosed with SAD, what can you do to feel better? Medications to increase serotonin is one option. Vitamin D supplements, regular exercise, especially aerobic, and good sleep hygiene can also help. That means turning off all technology at least 1 hour before going to bed, eliminating long naps, and keeping regular sleeping and waking times even on the weekends. Another option is light therapy. Most patients with seasonal affective disorder or underlying depression or bipolar disease that worsen in the winter will respond well to increased light exposure. You may see benefits from walking outdoors every day for 30 minutes on a sunny day or up to 2 hours on a cloudy day. However, the reality is most of us do not have time to walk 2 hours a day, and we work in offices with indoor lighting. A light box or lamp is helpful for many with SAD, and something I use myself. When looking for a light box, check for a lux rating. Look for one that is 10,000 lux. You only need to use the lamp for 30 to 60 minutes in the morning. If you use it too long, it can actually make it harder for you to fall asleep. It's important to use the light shortly after awakening and around the same time each day for the most benefit. Be careful not to position the light too close to your face or stare directly into the light, and always follow the manufacturer's instructions. I use my light box every day in the morning, and yes, I work in a windowless office. Typically, many people see improvement in their symptoms in just 1 to 4 weeks with consistent light use. There are many models and sizes of these lamps, so take the time to research and find the one that's best for you. Finally, for those of you who have a hard time getting up during the dark winter mornings, a dawn simulator is another item you may want to check out. A dawn simulator is an alarm clock with a light that gets progressively brighter 30 to 60 minutes before the alarm goes off. Just like a light box, there are many different styles available on the market. If your symptoms persist or worsen, please contact your primary care provider and talk to them openly about your concerns. They can help create a plan to make the long winter months a little bit brighter.
And there you have it, a short little recap. I think we covered all of that, but I think it'd be important to just go over that one more time, just to make sure some of that sticks.
And here is a ending quote that I thought would be fitting to end this presentation with. Edith Sitwell said, "Winter is a time for comfort, for good food and warmth, for the touch of a friendly hand, and for a talk beside the fire. It is the time for home." We also are interns at HHS, and we offer individual, family, and couple therapy at reduced scales. And so if therapy is something that you may be interested in, you can call the main line at 847-781-4850. Thank you for having us.
All right. Thank you both so much for the presentation and the information. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box or the Q&A box, whichever you're most comfortable with. Here's our first question. They have a two-part question. The first one is, does an infrared lamp count as light therapy? And the second question, going outside between 6 and 8 a.m., is that only effective if it is not cloudy?
Well, I can speak to the 6 a.m. question. The recommendation for 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. is mostly because that is when the most optimal sunlight is out. And that's when the 30-minute walks are more optimal. When it's a cloudy day, being outside for longer periods of time would be helpful. And so noting that while the 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. hours may be the most effective, whenever you're able to go out and get sunlight, please do.
In terms of the light itself, I did read, I'm not super savvy on different types of light boxes, but I think I did read that oftentimes the light that you see is not the light that's causing some of the therapy, but also some other wavelengths of light. I'm not sure if IR alone would be sufficient. I would definitely look into different devices and speak with your doctor as well, or sleep specialist, just to verify that for sure.
Definitely. Can you guys talk to the importance of routine when it comes to SAD? Is it important to have that positive routine every day to keep yourself motivated to keep going?
I would absolutely say yes. And this is not just routine in activities, but I guess in sleep, in eating, and a lot of things we do, including access to sunlight. I think having that routine gives us kind of an anchor, something to rely on. I think having that can eliminate some of the chaos and stresses of our day by knowing, okay, at least I have this, that's set in stone for me. That's going to be there, to do regardless of how my day goes, how I'm feeling. And of course, yes, for the sleep for sure, having that standard, sleep-wake cycle can really help. Difficult to do at times, I know. Eating as well, having that late night craving for something that's not great for you can happen, but I think overall, sticking to that routine can be really, really helpful. And not just having a routine, but making sure that you have maybe a plan or organization. I think having all of that written down for yourself, having the in-a-set planner can take a lot off your mind. I think when you keep it all in your head at times, it can be quite burdensome to try to balance it all out, making sure you're not forgetting anything. So I think that having it organized, written down can be very, very helpful in that regard as well.
A routine and having a routine can also let you know when you're not on your routine. And so if you notice yourself having more difficulty making appointments, or, I usually eat at this time, but I find myself eating a little later, or I totally skip the time. That might be another indication that something is going on. And so routines are helpful in order to help keep you anchored, and also serve as a way just to know something may be going on that you may not be aware of.
Excellent. As two practitioners of talk therapy, what would you say to someone who says, well, I just kind of get sad around this time of the season. I don't think talking to a therapist is really worth it, or I feel like I'm wasting their time because it's not something more extreme or serious, or in their mind serious. What would you say to someone who's skeptical about talk therapy when it comes to seasonal affect disorder?
Yeah.
So thank you. So I think one big thing is, how you feel matters, I would say. I think, and I've seen this before, concerns that, how I feel, it might not be significant enough for my therapist. Is this really, am I really sad? Maybe I'm just kind of down right now. Let me just wait it out. And I think, speaking from a counselor, therapist point of view, really your experience, how you feel is the most important. There's no need to trust, there's no need to justify things to us. We're on your side, we're here with you to go through and, process how you're feeling. And if you feel upset, if you feel distressed, that's how you feel. And we don't want to, say this any other way, but how you experience, how you perceive things. And that's the most important thing to us.
Talk therapy allows for us to provide emotional support. And a lot of times when you're having feelings of depression, there's feelings of guilt, there's feelings of being isolated, withdrawn, and also feelings of hopelessness. And when you are dealing with those things on your own, they can be magnified. Talk therapy is not for everybody. As clinicians, we can say that. However, being able to talk to people who are uplifting is just as important. And so if you are hesitant to start talk therapy because you're not quite sure how it may go, talking to friends and family is another thing to also do. Surrounding yourself with support, surrounding yourself with community. As clinicians, we're here to help you also look for ways in your community to increase that support. And talk therapy doesn't always go on for years and years. It can literally just be, it can be a month or 2 months. You know what? I think that I have gotten some coping skills to navigate on my own. We don't want you in therapy forever. That means that we're not doing our jobs. And so the point is for you to gain some skills and insights that can help you navigate, whether it's SAD or any other mental health condition, so that you can live your best life.
I just want to add, if you have those concerns, I'd recommend also talking to your therapist, talking to us about that. I think, if you're having discomforts, worries, I think those are things to also explore with your therapist. And I believe they'll be willing and open to processing that with you. I think that's a very important thing, that trust in therapy, that openness, that collaboration as well.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. Uranaya and Justin, thank you so much. We really appreciate you presenting for us tonight. All right. And we appreciate you at home for joining us. Thanks for being here. Check our website, schaumburglibrary.org. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Have a good night. Take care.
Good night.